Every club.
Every day.
The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Daily Southampton, part of the Global Sports Podcast Network. I, as always, Zach, Ingo, Finch, your host. We've had a few days away. Always joined by my co-host Gregory Elliott. Look. Maybe my brain is as twisted as the feet of our players, like the hands of yet another defeat. Well, I like Jurek Ball for the first game, mate.
It was alright. We scored a goal. What do you want?
Scoring a goal was a highlight. It's going to be really nice when we get to see one in another 100 years or however long it will be before we see a goal. I think you pulled out a random stat during the game when we were texting one another. Was it the first goal in like 450 minutes of football?
Yeah, I heard it from Adam Blackmore on Radio Solent. 450 minutes since we scored our last Premier League goal.
That is incredibly upsetting. So yeah, today was obviously the game against Crystal Palace. It went about it's not as well as we expected. Let's face it. We had a little bit more hope. I had a little bit more hope. Call it festive merriment, Christmas, whatever you want to call it. We kind of went in with a little bit more hope after the West Ham game. That was dashed by, once again, the realisation that regardless of what manager we have, most of the Premier League teams are just better than us. That seemed to be what I think today. There was a lot of cutting-edge quality, and we'll talk about the first half, and we'll talk about sort of the controversial decision. But as I summed it up in a tweet, which someone agreed with could be literally the entirety of our season, was we had more than enough time to change the game, just looked a bit toothless, which, that's just how I feel, and it's just every game we play. Yeah. So we could be upset as we want.
One of the stats they pulled out on the commentary of the version of the game I was watching was that at half-time, the expected goals were like 1.0 something for Crystal Palace and 1.2 for Southampton.
Yeah,
most of which would have come from the tap-in from the goal. But I will say that after that, bearing in mind that was at half-time, at the end of the game, our expected goals were 1.3. So it really tells you all you need to know about we had our goal, and that was it.
It's just again though. For me, it was that Crystal Palace clicked into gear, and we were already at top gear at that point. And I think that it says a lot about the players that we have. And it's no disrespect. I'm seeing sort of condemnation across the board on multiple players that I think really, really played really well. I'm seeing praise for players that probably didn't play that well. We've all got our different opinions, but there were people saying that Kyle Walker-Peters was switched off and not paying attention. Yet, as far as I could see, he was the one that produced the assist that got the goal into the box, and is one of the only players that consistently is able to do that. We made very hard, sort of.
Right? As a fullback, it's a difficult position, and to get into those attacking positions, I guess it does leave. But you got 3 defenders, and theoretically in this shape, 2 supposedly holding midfielders. Although neither of the midfielders that we played in that midfield today actually. But that's not their strength.
So let's roll it back then to the lineup itself. So I was quite surprised. Sugawara out, not really surprised after his error last game. And Brien, who I was really surprised by, but was very impressed with the amount of crosses he managed to get into the box. He had a couple of good strikes as well. Didn't do anything, but at the same time, he's one of the more prolific goal scorers in our team. Our £500,000 transfer from Luton. Very much so, mate. But in defence, it was pretty much the same. Manning misses out, which is a bit of a shame. And by the time he came on, there was barely a chance for him to do anything. I think, but especially where Kyle prefers to be on the right. It's bizarre to me that we keep putting him out on the left. Downs is out with an injury, so our 2 holding midfielders, we played with sort of Aribo and Matty Fernandez, which was a bit weird.
Neither of those players are holding midfielders.
No. Obviously, Aribo did his best for a little bit until he was swapped out for an actual holding midfielder who looked a lot more comfortable in that position, Onewatchu. And obviously, Matty Fernandez did his best. I think he played really well, considering once again tried to do anything. I think he's got a lot to do with work on delivery into the box, and you can say that. But if you're going to make him the designated corner, free kick, basically any set piece kicker whatsoever, then for the love of God, give him some lessons, because it seems to be once again that's just a problem that we have. Obviously, Dibbling gets to start again, played well, got a goal. Tall Paul got another start, but to be honest, after about 15 minutes, looked like the entire wind had been taken out of the poor man. Like, goodness gracious, I've never seen a bloke look so tired on a football pitch. And bear in mind, he's running around with significantly more, more to carry around than most people, just with how tall he is. Before the game, Greg texted me a wonderful little sort of bingo card of Paul Onewatchu of when he's going to get his first goal. Random Onewatchu moments, which we had a couple of, to be fair. He had a couple of chest around, did a couple of his hold up movements, but yeah, it was just a bit sort of lineup wise. Did it surprise you that we didn't play a holding? I can understand if we lost downs, but it's weird to me we didn't start Onewatchu, considering.
I'm guessing it's a fitness thing, right? Like, he played basically all of Boxing Day, and hasn't had a lot of minutes prior to that. I guess it seemed at the time the sensible thing to not start him, maybe with an eye to, I don't know. It's a strange one, but clearly Juric thought that they would be sufficient in that area, but we just got overrun in the midfield and struggled to get the ball beyond that point of the pitch.
How did you feel about Armour over Archer?
Look, we talked about it before, that he does a lot of the work off the ball that I think Juric likes. But it feels like Tall Paul at full fitness and Archer running off him is the combination that's going to get us the goals. But, I mean, Adam Armstrong at least had the good common sense to not try and score a goal and instead passed it to someone that can put the ball in the net. So it's hard to say a bad word about him, to be honest. He ran and he pressed and he got the assist, and it is. Yeah, I feel like Archer should feel really hard done by to have not got more minutes in the last two games.
Agreed. Lineup was weird. And whether you want to call it an experiment or not, I don't think it was hugely experimental other than the midfield. Everything else kind of slotted into place nicely. But I guess we'll go in and talk about the first half after a word from our partners at Zencastr.
Yeah, so here at the Global Sports Podcast Network, we spent a lot of time selecting our delivery platform, and Zencastr came out the clear winner, with 4K video recording from your phone and AI editing that automatically removes all those ums and ahs. It's super easy to start a podcast that sounds great and is delivered efficiently. If you're ready to tell your story, check out the link in the show description and learn more about Zencastr.
Well, let's talk about the first half. Obviously, probably the preferable first half for the Saints fans. We literally seem to come out of the block chasing as we seem to when we start these games off really, really well. Some really good play from Onewatchu and Armstrong. We had a corner quite early on, 4 minutes in, which obviously led to nothing. We had a couple of missed the ball here and there moments, and obviously there was another Onewatchu moment, the one that I've marked down, Greg, at 11 minutes when he chested the ball down and held that up, and he was doing all of the things that everyone seems to completely love him for. And we started off so quick with so much pace, and my worry was playing a team with the intensity and fitness of Palace is, will we sustain this? And obviously the answer to that was no.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, I mean, we started off well and almost caught them napping on us. Got the goal from it. Great, good start, the perfect start. And yeah, almost from that point forward, that's where the positivity and structure going forward fell apart.
That's the thing, right? Like, we
just had too much for us.
After we scored, they almost scored. Benrek got in with a couple of divisive challenges. He obviously eventually got booked, but the amount of fouls that he committed.
In fact, it took him until the 80th minute to get booked. It's nothing short of a miracle.
And I will hold my hands up to any Palace fans that, like, he should have probably got a booking much earlier.
It kind of went both ways, though. There was one of their defenders who also should have been booked about 4 times and didn't. So I guess it's kind of balancing out.
I think that it was surprised it took so long for cards to be shown. Right, it seemed that you kind of wanted to let the game go a little bit, which I understand. But I think no one was happy with the refereeing, really. But also, it wasn't any of the most disastrous things I've ever seen.
Yeah, there weren't any clearly controversially bad calls. I've seen some fans saying that the VAR decision to not overturn the Palace goal from the corner was a joke, but I want to make it incredibly clear that I don't want to live in a world where that's a foul. That's not the type of football I want to see.
Well, I think allow me to do my run. As I already kind of alluded to in the first part, we have these moments this season that we can look back on, and we seem to think it would make the blindest bit of difference. And I genuinely think that it is a good way to make us feel better about going down when we inevitably go down. Touch wood, maybe not, who knows. But it is infuriating that, if you are going to drop your head at 30 minutes when there is another 60, maybe 70 minutes worth left of playing football, and your manager, because this will be the second manager's done it, is going to talk about that decision afterwards as if it was the key moment. It might be the key moment, but once it's done and it's done, you can't change the result at that point. You can't even go after the game's been finished. You can't go to the refereeing council and say, we would like to change the result off the back of this. It doesn't happen. To then just kind of drop heads a little bit is what frustrates me. And I don't think they necessarily did that this game. I think that, as I pointed out earlier, Palace clicked into gear and have another level of, gear that we don't. And one of the things post-match that I'm very excited about, Jurek saying, is that Dibbling said he's a little bit stricter. And bear in mind, they've had barely any training sessions as it is that hopefully that means that, they're going to get up to a point where these players will manage more than 45 minutes without struggling to see out the game, because if they're going to play this level of football, they're going to need to be fit, and we can't have all of this sort of a striker or our players disappearing after 40 minutes looking like they're absolutely knackered. And I know that I can say this here sat as a bloke who sits on his armchair a lot of the time and watches football, but also I am not a professional athlete. So if you are a professional athlete, there's an expectation, there's a fitness.
An incredibly out of shape human being, but I managed to drag myself around a football pitch twice a week. If you were paying me £50,000 a week, I think I'd manage 90 minutes.
Yeah, and it's maybe the motivation's a struggle because they already feel like they're down, and I get it. But you've got this new manager coming in. You've got players here that are supposedly wanting to. Do you think you're even going to get in the shop window at this rate? Because if you're hoping you're going to be playing in a big league, you need to show that you're a good player. And I think that it is frustrating that when something bad happens to us, the mentality drop, which has been now shown to be not just the manager in charge thing, it is really, really frustrating. And yes, okay, maybe there is a call in there for it being disallowed, but also does it really matter? Because directly after we had a corner, we've had tons of set pieces. I think we must have ended. I don't know how many corners we ended the game with, but that was at one point we'd had no goals from 78 corners. That is so far this season. That is nuts. Now, maybe it would be better to invest in a set piece coach than a new players necessarily in January. Maybe
we had 7 corners.
Maybe a new set piece coach just instead of a new pub would be nice. But afterwards we stuck it out until half time. We had some really good. Ramsdale save against Sarr is one that sticks out. And then obviously another corner that was had the bicycle kick. But, once again, set piece ends up in a goal. And it's just like we'll never learn. Frustrating.
Yeah.
And then there was also that other goal that I don't quite understand how it was kept out. It was the one which came off the back heel of Kyle Walker-Peters.
Oh, yeah, that was insane.
to stay out. And it's like, there's some luck in there our side as well, because
That's what I mean, right? Because you go back to like the VAR decision and it changing the game, but say what you like about it. If you want to say it should have been chalked off, I couldn't disagree more, but fine. But again, it literally flicked off of Walker Peters' heel. We had no clue where the ball was or it was going. And realistically, that and anywhere else, that's a goal. So it's
they just they're struggling to finish chances this season, but they seem to be able to. They seem threatening in the final third in a way that we aren't, and I think that we're starting to say that about nearly every team we're playing at the moment, and we're starting to realise it's maybe just it's an ingrained thing into this current Saints team about getting it in the goal in the end, and that's why it's no surprise to me that it's fringe players that and not fringe and players like Dibbling who just have confidence running through them. Besides that, that are scoring the goals, right? Bree scored a few, Sugawara. It's like, and even Taylor Harwood-Bellis, who is a player that you could see by the end of that game was getting frustrated, but we lost the battles in the key areas, and I don't think there's any shame to that. It's just frustrating because I kind of felt like as soon as they'd equalised, they were going to score again and win, and as soon as they scored again, didn't really feel like we were going to get back into it.
I think I texted you in about the 65th minute and said, doesn't feel like anything's coming here.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And from sort of the substitution point, we'll talk about the second half short after a break shortly. But after the substitutions, I stopped writing notes because I just knew nothing was going to happen, because that just seems to be the way that it is nowadays. It is the struggle of being a Saints fan, right? I don't know. It's not nice that we can sort of switch off at the end, right, Greg? Do you agree?
It's gross. It's horrible. I would rather that I felt like there was something coming from the game, even if that doesn't come. I hate feeling defeated so early. I was looking at the bench and thinking, who's coming on and off that bench and making an impact? And the answer was, I just don't see it happening.
Indeed. Right. So we will discuss the second half and most of the substitutions after a word from our partners at the Global Sports Podcast Network. The Global Sports Podcast Network is changing the face of football podcasting with dedicated daily content for every Premier League team, women's football, fantasy football, and a daily Premier League wrap-up broadcasted in 5 different languages. This is your one-stop shop for your daily football fix. Find GSPN wherever you find your usual podcasts. And we're back. So, second half, Greg, that was where we really started to go downhill. Why do you think Jurek didn't take off a Rebo at half time?
I don't know. I don't know if he was
weird
giving
decision.
him a chance to show that he could play a position that isn't his natural position. I just don't know. It felt like the obvious change to make at half time, and to then go on to make it so close after half time.
Well, we'd had a corner just before that ended up almost being a goal for Crystal Palace. Sorry, because like they jumped on it immediately, which is one of those things where our terrible distribution comes into play again, and our terrible set pieces came into play again. And I'm thinking at that point maybe he just saw, right, I've had enough of this. We need to defensively shore up, which is incredible because less than a minute or so later, obviously Crystal Palace scored with off the back of a set piece. Which was, to be fair, quite an incredible goal. As they scored an absolute, that's just a 4 in 4, I think, playing against us. Another player like Son, who whenever they play against Southampton, just score.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen people try and blame the goal on Fernandes, but I don't really see what else he could have done.
He tried to get it away. It didn't quite get away.
He just hit it low, hard, and through people, and it was a beautiful strike. What can you do about that?
You go back a couple of weeks ago, we wouldn't have even tried to clear it. We'd have tried to keep it in the box to play it out. At least we're trying to get rid of it now. Where there are some dangerous situations today that were resolved. Crystal Palace were all over us, but let's face it, they only scored 2 goals, and that was mainly off the back of set pieces. They had the opportunity to score more. We actually defended, I think, all right. A problem is that once we were 2 down, once they'd scored 2 goals, we just didn't look like we were, scoring again. And there were a couple of times where they had sort of they had like the sort of ball flash across in front of our goal and almost have tap-ins. And then, not really a lot. We had an incredible piece of play from Fernandez at 63 minutes. No, I do remember what that was. So that's when he basically took on the entire team on his own and went for goal. And that was a solid piece of play. And after that, we finally had substitutions, which, in my opinion, kind of ended the game, which was Armstrong and Onewatchu off, Archer and Suleiman are on, because Archer had no service for the rest of the game.
Yeah, well, the problem is, I think the commentators put it best, that Paul was our outlet for the entirety of that game, and Archer is just not winning that aerial battle, and because that's not what his strengths are.
Exactly. That's not
so
bad
to whip
thing
them
again,
both off is, I mean, I guess it is what it is, because Paul was so clearly flagging, so what can you do? And then Sulemana did, exactly what you'd expect at this point, and what we've seen from him every time that he's been on the pitch. Absolutely nothing. So,
well, this is the thing, right? Like, in my head, it's because you're going to bring on a really fast-pacey winger to feed the ball through to Archer quickly. But again, like, I just don't know if it's a combination of him clearly not wanting to be here, but also I'm struggling to understand why he gets minutes. Like, at this rate,
I don't get it.
Diaz take it over to him. I don't know. But this is
That's
also part of the problem.
What did you think 3 weeks ago? You'd be saying, "Well, we're giving Brereton Diaz minutes over anyone." Let alone...
but in my head, you should be bringing back a Dozy from Anderlecht, and we should have never sent him off on loan. I don't think he was a bad player for us most of last season. I find it very strange we sent him off to currently a Champions League squad. Say what you want about them. That's where they're sitting in comparison to us. So we kind of, I put that I have no idea why we refused to play them together. And then we had kind of a foul from Taylor Harwood-Bellis, which was soft, but it was what it was. It resulted in a good effort for Crystal Palace, but it was deflected in the end. And then, there were a couple of sort of frustration. Then we finally sort of started seeing the cards after one card had come out. There's a card for Will Hughes, card for Benderek, and then the 85th minute, where again nothing hugely had happened in that 20-minute spell. There was nothing really for me to write down. Then we ended up with, obviously, Lallana and Manning on, Carl Walker-Peters and Dibbling off. Carl Walker-Peters doing probably our best creator, then off. Manning tried. Dibbling then off, because they're trying to manage his minutes, but I think the 85 in comparison to 90 isn't much of a difference. And then Lallana came out of, and I found some of the words interesting that Jurek had spoken about. That it was like having an assistant manager already at the club.
Yeah.
Fair. So that was.
I get it. He's an experienced head, and that's always going to be his role at the club. And in a way, I'm glad that Jurek is seeing him that way. He's going to make these cameo appearances off the bench. It's probably the most we can expect from him. Hope that he can bring some quality in those moments. But yeah, I don't know.
So obviously, I know we discussed the lineup and we're now working front to back, but there's not really much else to say. The game was lost at that point. The game's over. It's another 0 points on the board towards our desperate struggle to stay to try and beat Derby's point record, because let's face
that's
it,
got to be the target. Yeah,
that's what we're fighting for at this point.
Sure, our last away win was Leeds.
Right. Thanks. Armel Balakochak was on the bench today.
Yeah, interesting.
So obviously lots of discussion behind the scenes, talking about how we're going to need him. Hopefully he's going to play. He's got to work himself back into the squad, which was, I think everyone's sort of seen what my thoughts are. I kind of find it baffling, because Jurek was talking about watching him play 2 years ago, and I'm like, well, yeah, but since then he's not played a lot after 2 years. But I'm happy that if he can come back in, put in a performance, and doesn't have a horrible attitude, what have we got to lose? We got nothing to lose at this point. Really, really be awful for him to have the entire 2 seasons that he spent at Southampton being relegation fights.
Well, yeah.
But then sometimes that's what you sign up for.
So, I don't know. I mean, like all of our players, I hope that he makes his way back into the squad, comes good, and becomes the saving grace of the team. But I'm not convinced that I believe it or see it. And but I guess what's most interesting to me that I thought was actually that Jack Stevens has served his suspension now and is technically back available for selection. and ADK
Yeah,
makes it on the bench before him.
the only injury concern supposedly was Flynn Downs, and obviously long term we've got Will Smallbones and Ross Stewart. So is Jack Stevens supposedly quote unquote injured, or do we just stop talking about him, or is Jurek looked at a guy that's had 2 red cards, supposedly the club captain, and gone absolutely not touching it with barge pole? We don't know. It's difficult. Like, we don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but you can start to see the relationships he's forming with different people. And Bednarek's been solidly captain pretty much since he's come in. And again, it's difficult to judge on a reign of so far two games and a week and a bit.
Well, 2
That week
games
being
in
over
4
Christmas.
days, right? They've probably
Yeah,
had a total of maybe 3 days on the training pitch max,
if we're lucky.
and one of them would have been a recovery day, I'd have thought. So, yeah, horrible time to have to take over as manager.
I think it's look, the West Ham loss. There was so much optimism, positivity, and this game, I think there's a lot to pick the side apart on. And it wasn't all terrible for a long spell at the beginning. We felt like we were in it, but there's a lot sort of he's able to see live and pick up on. And again, like, I just harker back to Dibbling saying he's a lot stricter, and I can only hope that that's a positive thing to try and instill a mentality to put up a fight, I guess, because it's difficult to see where we are. It's so difficult to see where we are now after the highs of sort of last year. And again, we did our Boxing Day episodes, and we can look back over our last couple of Boxing Days, and the 5-0 win against Swansea last year in the Championship is night and day. The type of football, I guess, is going to become night and day. But yeah, it's just I think
it's going to be really interesting
right?
to see how he builds upon this, because now, like, we've had these 2 fixtures where he's had effectively no time really, apart from minimal time here and there, as well as having to deal with players who aren't at their peak of fitness through a busy schedule of games. He now has an actual week on the training pitch, that plenty of recovery time that everyone you would hope to be back to fitness and to strength, not having to think about rotating because there's no midweek game afterwards. It's 1 week until our next league game, then 1 week until a cup game, and then another week until our league game. So we've got time between the fixtures to sort it out.
God, we're going to have to start thinking about what we're going to put in all these podcasts, mate. For so long now, we've just had so much just match after match after match after match. And then we had our manager being fired and all that jazz. So yeah, it's going to be weird to get back to some sort of quote unquote normality.
Yeah.
I'm hoping the same. I guess that's the most optimistic note I can leave it on, because ultimately we lost 2-1 and it wasn't great. We scored a goal. There we go. Yeah. We can all sing it. And we scored a goal.
It was still slightly better than watching us play under Russell Martin.
It was better than watching us. Yeah, it was better than watching us give it be 5-1, because we passed it back to Ramsdale like 4 or 5 times.
Let's call it a work in progress.
Work in progress it is. I just like the build up to the wins to be more draws than just solid losses. But unfortunately, that is not the way that it's going. We will have to see what will happen going forward. But as always, thank you for joining me, Craig.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you for joining us, wonderful listeners. We are available on all of the social media platforms. Twitter/X, because I will still call it Twitter. Blue Sky, Instagram, TikTok, all of that fun stuff. We try to post twice daily. Usually shouting out the podcast, usually asking some questions. Usually posting funny clips of me saying something dumb, Greg laughing, or vice versa. Maybe it'll be the bit where I messed up the intro, who knows.
Remember that time when I predicted 15 points before Christmas and we're still on 6 overall?
That was fun to post on Christmas, mate, I'm not going to lie. Anywho, it's been a pleasure as always, and we will see you in the next one.
Every club, every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.